Welcome to the deep dive, where we try to pull out the key insights from some interesting sources, make things clear, maybe spark an aha moment without, overwhelming you.
Exactly. Think of it as your shortcut. We
Yeah.
do the digging, you get the insights that really stick.
And today we're diving into P.D. Ouspensky, specifically ideas from his book, The Fourth Way. We've got some key excerpts.
And the goal really is to explore a few core concepts. They offer let's say, a pretty different way of looking at ourselves and maybe our potential.
Okay, let's jump right in. There's this core idea right off the bat that's powerful. The notion that we aren't nearly as awake or in control as we think.
That's absolutely central, yeah. He suggests that as we are, humanity is operating way below our actual capabilities. We're sort of incomplete.
And this metaphor he uses being asleep.
hmm
What does that actually look like? What are the signs of this psychological sleep?
Well, it's not literal sleep, obviously. It's more about certain patterns, like getting totally caught up, identified with thoughts or feelings, or constantly considering things, judging that internal chatter, but without real awareness. Habitual negative emotions are a big one.
Right.
And fundamentally, it's the absence of something he calls self-remembering, that continuous sense of your own presence. We basically live, reacting on autopilot.
Self-remembering. That phrase, it really stands out. The notes mentioned it resonated. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because it points to something we might vaguely sense, how rarely we're truly present to our own existence while we're living it. It suggests we're kind of absent from our own lives. And Ouspensky says that trying to remember ourselves is the act of trying to awake.
So it's not passive. You don't just drift into wakefulness. It takes active, sustained effort.
Exactly. He really stresses that. Waking up isn't some sudden flash. It means fundamentally changing a lot of ingrained habits. It requires work, consistent work.
Okay, so work. But then there's this other idea, maybe even more challenging. One excerpt says, man 1, 2, and 3 cannot do anything. Everything just happens to him. That feels really counterintuitive.
Oh, absolutely. It flies right in the face of how we feel every day, doesn't it? We think we make plans, we make choices, we do things.
Yeah.
But Ouspensky argues that the real capacity to do, meaning acting from true consciousness, real intention, that belongs to higher levels of being, man number 5, 6, 7 in his system.
So for most of us, most of the time is more like reacting, not acting.
Largely, yes. His idea is that our lives are mostly run by these automatic patterns and reactions, mechanical laws, he calls them.
Like being a machine.
In a sense. And so becoming conscious is tied up with getting free from that mechanicalness. But the big hurdle is that we think we're already conscious. We mistake the reactions for deliberate action.
And the first step to getting free is just realizing you're not conscious in that way. That seems like a paradox.
It is. It's a huge paradox. And that illusion of consciousness, especially the illusion that we are the ones doing, is incredibly persistent. Very hard to break. Recognizing the lack of real control, that's the crucial, difficult first step.
Okay, if we can't just decide to wake up or decide to do, where do you start? The material points to self-observation, self-study.
Yes, self-study is the starting point. And he suggests focusing specifically on observing our own lying.
Lying, like telling untruths.
Not just to others, but mostly to ourselves, the ways we deceive ourselves, the wrong ideas, the illusions we cling to, the stories we tell ourselves about why we do things or who we are.
So becoming aware of your own self-deception, like an internal detective.
Exactly like that. Trying to separate what's actually happening, the facts, from our imagination or our illusions about it. Ouspensky insists that's the only way to learn something genuinely new.
Right.
And it has to be psychological self-study, looking at how your mind actually works. And not just learning the words or concepts. It's about seeing it in action inside yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Reading about anger is one thing, but catching yourself being angry, observing that's different.
Totally different. It's about direct observation.
Then the discussion moves to this idea of the plurality of I's, that our sense of self, our I, isn't just one thing.
Yeah, this is fundamental too. He argues that what feels like a single consistent I is really a whole collection of different I's. They're often contradictory, disconnected.
Like multiple personalities?
Kind of, but maybe less dramatic and more fleeting. They just pop up and take over for a bit, then another one does, each with its own little agenda, its own voice. And there's no central controller, no permanent I in charge.
So it's like a committee meeting inside your head where the members keep changing and nobody's the chair.
That's a great analogy, a constantly shifting committee. And these different I's often show up as the different roles we play.
like how you act at work versus at home or with different friends.
Precisely. The professional I, the family I, the friend I.
And he says this is mostly unconscious. We just switch between these roles without realizing it.
Yeah. That's the key. If it were conscious acting, that'd be one thing. But usually we flip between these I's and roles automatically. We just react to the situation and think it's us doing it, when it's really just whichever I is temporarily in the driver's seat.
Okay, this connects to another distinction he makes between being and knowledge. It sounds like one is much more important for this work.
Definitely. Being is, well, it's about what you are, fundamentally.
Yeah.
Your level of development, your capacity, separate from just what you know. Knowledge is the information, the facts you've learned.
And Ouspensky's point is,
That just accumulating knowledge isn't enough. If you want real development, you have to work on changing your being. Otherwise, the knowledge doesn't really land or it gets distorted.
so you can't just read your way to enlightenment, basically.
That's the idea. He suggests your level of being actually limits how much knowledge you can truly understand and use. Piling up more knowledge without changing your being might even be unhelpful. You might misunderstand it, misapply it.
Which brings us back again to self-remembering. This seems like the key practice for changing being.
Exactly. Self-remembering, that deliberate act of being aware of yourself right here, right now, that's presented as the absolute cornerstone.
You mentioned earlier it's not common in Western psychology.
Relatively speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
Ouspensky positions it as the very beginning of waking up from that sleep state. It's about consciously bringing attention to your self-existing alongside whatever else you're experiencing.
It's fleeting, right? The material says we might wake up for a second, then we're gone again.
That's the common experience, yes.
Yeah.
The pullback into automaticity, into sleep, is incredibly strong, which just highlights why it takes such persistent, ongoing effort to make self-remembering more stable.
Okay, now this whole system, it sounds like it puts a big emphasis on understanding things for yourself rather than just taking them on faith.
Very much so. The focus is on comprehension, on understanding, and especially on the psychological side, verifying these ideas through your own self-observation.
So test it out yourself.
Right. He specifically contrasts understanding, really grasping it from experience, with just accepting ideas because someone told you so.
It feels quite practical, almost empirical in a way.
It aims to be, yes, within the realm of inner experience.
Now, the excerpts also briefly mention some bigger, almost cosmological ideas. The law of three, the ray of creation. What's the quick takeaway on those?
Briefly, the law of three is the idea that any phenomenon, anything that happens, is the result of three forces interacting: active, passive, and neutralizing.
Okay.
The ray of creation is like a map of the universe showing different levels of reality, from the absolute down to, well, us on Earth. It kind of situates humanity and suggests our place comes with certain limitations. The material hints that maybe some things we perceive as unfair are just consequences of where we are on this ray.
So these laws give a kind of context for our situation.
Exactly. A larger framework to understand why things are the way they are and what potential for movement might exist within that framework.
But crucially, despite limitations, the message isn't hopeless. Development is possible. And this is where schools come in.
Yes. Ouspensky uses schools to mean specific, organized settings where a particular kind of knowledge gets transmitted. He calls it influence C, suggesting it comes from a higher or more conscious source.
Different from everyday influences or just reading books.
Right. Influence A is ordinary life. Influence B might be art, philosophy, religion, things that point beyond the ordinary. Influence C is this direct transmission within a school structure.
And these schools need students to be ready.
Yes, they usually require some level of preparation, some understanding. And the fourth way itself is presented as one such path, a type of schoolwork. It's distinct because it aims to develop mind, emotion, and body all together.
Not just focusing on one, like a monk or a yogi might traditionally do.
Correct. It's meant to be a path you can follow while living an ordinary life, working on all sides simultaneously, more integrated.
Got it. The material also really hammers home that changing even small things about ourselves takes huge effort. Why so difficult?
Well, think about the inertia, the ingrained habits, the mechanicalness we talked about, and all those conflicting eyes pulling in different directions.
Right.
Ouspensky's view is that real, lasting change really only happens through conscious effort within a system, like the fourth way. And you have to start small, but even those small, consistent efforts are incredibly hard to maintain against that internal resistance.
It's like trying to turn a massive ship with a tiny rudder. Needs constant pressure.
It's a good way to put it, constant conscious pressure.
Then we have identification. and it's linked to negative emotions. This sounds like a major energy leak.
Oh, huge. Identification is that state of being completely lost in something, an external event, an internal thought, a feeling, getting totally absorbed and losing yourself in it.
And that fuels negativity.
It acts like a magnet or a channel for negative emotions. When you identify with worry or anger or self-pity, you give it your energy, you let it run you. Ouspensky suggests it's one of the main ways we waste our vital energy.
So learning not to identify, to stay separate, that frees up energy.
That's the idea. If you can stop identifying, you stop feeding those states, and you have more energy available for conscious work, for self-remembering. But again, it takes practice, lots of practice. The source also briefly mentions external considering. How does that fit?
Right, contrasting it with internal considering.
Yes. Internal considering is being lost in your own thoughts about others, usually negative judgments or worries about what they think of you. External considering is presented as a more conscious effort, a form of self-remembering in relation to people, actually trying to understand their position, their needs, putting yourself in their shoes consciously.
So being aware of others consciously, not just reacting to them based on your own stuff.
Exactly. It's moving beyond that self-absorbed state in relationships.
And all this effort, all this work, the ultimate aim mentioned is being free. What does freedom mean here?
Fundamentally, it means gaining control over your own machine, your thoughts, emotions, reactions, becoming less mechanical, more conscious.
Less of a puppet to your own habits.
Precisely. Less pulled around by every little thing, having some degree of inner mastery. Defining that aim clearly can be part of the work itself, but the core direction is towards liberation from automaticity.
And finally, there's the strong emphasis on work and also paying. It's not just about learning, is it?
Definitely not passive learning. Work means the active effort, the application of these ideas in your life. And paying, well, it relates to the idea that you have to give something to receive something.
Like effort is the payment.
Effort is a big part of it, but it can also mean doing things that are difficult or that you wouldn't normally do, specifically for the sake of the work, for your development. Making sacrifices, perhaps, or undertaking specific tasks required by the system, it implies a necessary exchange.
So bringing it all together, Ouspensky's fourth way, as shown in these snippets, it's really a radical reevaluation of who we think we are and how aware we actually are.
It absolutely is. It suggests our normal state is far from the conscious, self-directed life we usually imagine.
But, and this is the crucial part, it also lays out a path. A demanding one, sure, but a path towards genuine change, towards greater consciousness through self-awareness, self-study, and that constant conscious effort.
The potential for transformation is there, but it hinges entirely on that active engagement, on the work.
Which leaves us with something for you, the listener, to think about. If our ordinary state really is like being asleep, what could possibly awaken in us if we could truly remember ourselves, even just a little more often?
Yeah.
And maybe consider, how might that very strong feeling that you're always doing, always in control, actually be preventing you from seeing yourself and your real situation more clearly?
It's definitely food for thought, an invitation to look inward with maybe slightly different eyes.
We hope this deep dive has given you some things to chew on. Maybe spark some curiosity to look further into Ouspensky if it resonates.
It's complex stuff, but fascinating.
Indeed. That's all for this session of the Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time for more explorations.